Alan Wright stood at the viewport of the small shuttle, watching as the massive Zalthraxian mothership grew larger in the distance. The alien vessel stretched nearly a mile long, its blue-gray hull shimmering with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. As Earth's chosen ambassador for the Galactic Council admission interview, Alan tried to calm his nerves. He was about to become the first human to board an alien ship without another human present. "Approaching docking sequence in 3 minutes," announced the shuttle's AI, preparing atmospheric adjustment for destination. Alan checked his diplomatic credentials one last time, straightening his simple Navy uniform. He carried no weapons, as per protocol, only a small bag with personal items and a tablet containing Earth's application for membership in the Galactic Council. At 46 years old, with gray starting to show at his temples, Alan had spent most of his career in diplomatic service, but nothing had prepared him for this mission. "Remember," his supervisor had told him before departure, "this is just a standard admission interview. Answer their questions truthfully, present our case, and try not to cause an interstellar incident." Easy to say when you're not the one walking into an alien ship alone, Alan thought. The shuttle slowed as it approached the enormous docking bay. Alan felt the slight bump as magnetic clamps engaged, securing the small craft to the mothership. Docking complete. External atmosphere analysis shows breathable mixture with higher nitrogen content than Earth standard. Temperature is approximately 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Alan grabbed a light jacket from his bag. That's chilly. Atmospheric pressure is within human tolerance. No dangerous pathogens detected, the AI continued. You are cleared to disembark. Taking a deep breath, Alan stood at the airlock as it cycled open. A cold draft washed over him immediately. The shuttle hadn't exaggerated about the temperature. He stepped forward into alien territory, his heart beating faster with each step. Inside the massive docking bay, shadows loomed large as strange vessels of various shapes sat in neat rows. Lighting strips along the floor pulsed blue, presumably guiding him forward. Alan followed them toward a large circular door at the far end. Unseen by Alan, sensors throughout the bay were going haywire. In the mothership's control center, Commander Zix stared at the readings with growing alarm. "What is that heat signature?" Zix demanded, pointing at the bright orange blob moving across the thermal scanner. "Check the docking bay for fires immediately." Junior Officer Lev adjusted the sensors. "It appears to be coming from the Earth Ambassador, Commander." "Impossible. No living creature registers at that temperature." "The readings are consistent, sir. The entity from Earth is generating heat at approximately 98 degrees Fahrenheit internally." Zix's forearms moved in the Zalthraxian gesture of disbelief. "That's nearly hot enough to burn protein structures. Are we certain this creature is alive and not some form of mobile technology?" "Biological readings confirm it's organic, Commander. The creature appears to be maintaining this temperature voluntarily." Throughout the ship, the unusual thermal signature triggered automatic alerts. 3 separate decks activated emergency protocols as the system detected what it believed was a serious fire hazard moving through the vessel. As Alan approached the circular door, it slid open, revealing a reception chamber where 5 tall, blue-skinned aliens waited. Each stood nearly 7 feet tall with 4 slender arms and transparent exoskeletons that revealed shadowy organs beneath. They wore simple, silver uniforms that seemed to shimmer with their movements. Alan noticed immediately how they kept their distance, remaining at least 10 feet away. Their large, multifaceted eyes tracked his every move with obvious caution. "Welcome aboard the Celestial Voyager," said the central figure, speaking through a translation device attached to its narrow chest. "I am Captain Nix of the Zalthraxian Exploration Fleet. We apologize for the unusual reception, but your biological signature has activated several of our safety protocols." Alan smiled warmly. "Thank you for having me, Captain. I'm Ambassador Alan Wright from Earth. Is there a problem with your systems?" The aliens exchanged glances, their skin shifting to a slightly darker blue. "The problem is not with our systems," explained a smaller alien with scientific insignia. "I am Deputy Science Officer Frel. Our systems are working perfectly. They have detected that you are extremely hot." Alan raised an eyebrow. I don't understand. Your internal temperature, Frel continued, maintaining her distance. You are generating heat at levels our sensors typically associate with dangerous fires. A soft chuckle escaped Alan's lips before he could stop it. I'm sorry, but that's just normal human body temperature. All humans maintain approximately 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit internally. This statement caused visible shock among the aliens. Their skin rippled with patterns of light blue, which Alan would later learn indicated surprise or alarm. All humans? Captain Nix asked. Your entire species maintains internal temperatures that high? Yes, Alan confirmed, beginning to understand their reaction. Are Zalthraxians cold-blooded? We maintain body temperature through environmental regulation, Frel explained. Most spacefaring species evolved from what you would call cold-blooded ancestors. Generating your own heat is extremely rare and energy-intensive. Alan suddenly understood why the ship felt so cold to him. I see. On Earth, many animals are warm-blooded like humans. We call it being endothermic. Fascinating and somewhat alarming, Captain Nix said. We must adjust our protocols. Currently, you register as a walking fire hazard on our systems. While they spoke, more aliens had gathered in adjoining corridors, peering curiously at the human who generated his own heat. Alan could hear their whispers through the translation system. It survives at combustion temperatures. How does it not cook itself from the inside? Its planet must be incredibly cold if it needs so much internal heat. Captain Nix gestured toward a doorway. Please follow me to the diplomatic quarters. We have much to discuss before presenting you to the council. As Alan walked alongside the captain, he noticed how the alien maintained a careful distance. Am I making you uncomfortable? Alan asked. I assure you I won't burn you. Apologies, Ambassador. This is new territory for us. According to our medical understanding, sustained contact with your skin could cause mild tissue damage to our outer membranes. We will adapt. Captain Nix paused. Though I must ask, is it true that humans sometimes reach even higher temperatures when ill? Alan nodded. Yes, we call it a fever. Our bodies sometimes increase temperature to fight infections. The captain's skin swirled with patterns of deep blue. Remarkable. You fight illness with internal fire. As they continued deeper into the ship, emergency alerts finally ceased. The Zalthraxians had updated their systems to recognize that the intense heat signature moving through their vessel wasn't a fire hazard after all. It was just the human boarding. The diplomatic quarters assigned to Alan were spacious but uncomfortably cold. After showing him the room, Captain Nix had explained that they would adjust the environmental controls to what they believed might be human comfort levels. But it would take time. For now, Alan kept his jacket on and requested extra blankets. I hope this will be adequate until we can properly accommodate your thermal needs, Deputy Science Officer Frel said as she delivered 3 thin metallic sheets that served as Zalthraxian blankets. She wore what appeared to be protective gloves. When handling items Alan would touch. Thank you, Alan replied with a smile. I'll manage fine. Once alone, Alan contacted Earth to report his safe arrival. The communication was brief, standard protocol, but he made sure to mention the temperature issue and the aliens' fascinating reaction to human biology. They think we're walking furnaces, he explained to his supervisor. Their entire ship is kept at what we'd consider refrigerator temperatures. After the call ended, Alan tried to rest despite the cold. Tomorrow would begin his official role as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. He needed to be sharp and present humanity's best face. Morning, or what passed for morning on a spaceship, brought a soft chiming to his quarters. Alan had just finished dressing when the door slid open to reveal Frel, still keeping her cautious distance. Good cycle, Ambassador Wright. I have been assigned as your guide during your stay. She observed him with obvious scientific curiosity. May I ask how you maintained thermal regulation during your rest period? Alan smiled. I used the blankets and kept my clothes on. It wasn't ideal, but humans can tolerate a range of temperatures. Fascinating. Our species requires precise thermal conditions for optimal function. Frel gestured toward the corridor. The captain has scheduled a tour of our vessel before your official meeting with our delegation. As they walked through the massive ship, Alan noticed other crew members watching him with a mixture of fear and fascination. Many wore thin protective gear when they knew they would be near him. The word of the heat-generating human had clearly spread. "Your ship is impressive," Alan said, trying to make conversation as they entered a large atrium filled with strange plants. "How many crew members serve aboard?" "Approximately 3,000, Frel replied. "This is one of our scientific exploration vessels. We study new worlds and make contact with potential council species." "Like humans," Alan noted. "Yes, though your species presents unique challenges." They passed through the botanical section where alien plants grew in carefully controlled environments. Many resembled jellyfish more than earth plants, floating in nutrient baths with translucent tendrils that glowed softly. "These specimens come from across the galaxy," Frel explained. "Many would die if exposed to temperatures your body produces, naturally." As they continued their tour, they entered a busy section that Frel identified as a research laboratory. Several Zalthraxians worked at stations with equipment Alan didn't recognize. When they noticed him enter, all activity stopped. One of the scientists approached, maintaining the now familiar safe distance. "Ambassador, this is Senior Researcher Vorn. He has been studying your species' biological information that was provided in your application to the Council." Vorn's four hands moved in complex patterns that Alan assumed was some form of greeting. "Ambassador Wright, your biology defies several principles we believed were universal. May I ask you some questions?" Of course, Alan replied. "Your species' thermal regulation, is it constant? Does it fluctuate?" "Our core temperature remains fairly stable around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, though it can vary slightly throughout the day. It rises during physical exertion or illness." This statement caused a ripple of movement among the watching scientists. Vorn continued, "And this exertion, how much heat can humans generate?" "During intense exercise, we might increase a few degrees, but not much more. Our bodies release excess heat through sweating." "Sweating?" Frel asked. "We secrete water through our skin that evaporates to cool us down." The revelation that humans leaked water from their skin seemed to disturb the aliens even more than the heat issue. Vorn made notes on a transparent tablet. "Remarkable. And during this sweating, how much water is lost?" "It varies, but during intense activity in hot conditions, humans might lose several liters over a few hours." This caused actual gasps among the listeners. Water conservation was clearly important to their species. "One more question, if I may," Vorn said. "These temperature increases during illness, what purpose do they serve?" "Our elevated temperature helps fight infections. We call it a fever. It makes our body less hospitable to many pathogens." The scientist's skin changed to a deep blue. "You use heat as a defense mechanism." "Extraordinary." As they left the laboratory, Alan could hear excited discussion behind them. Frel guided him toward what she called the thermal adaptation chamber, where they hoped to create a more comfortable environment for his meeting with the captain. "Your biology has caused quite a stir among our crew," Frel admitted as they walked. "Some younger crew members have taken to calling you the living flame when they think no one is listening." Alan laughed. "That's actually kind of flattering." They arrived at a small conference room where the temperature had been raised. Significantly, it felt almost comfortable to Alan, though he noticed Frel's discomfort immediately. Her movements became quicker, more fluid. "Is this temperature difficult for you?" he asked with concern. "It is. Stimulating," she admitted. "Our metabolism increases at higher temperatures. It is not dangerous for brief periods, just energy-consuming." Captain Nix entered, along with 3 other senior officers. All moved with the same quick, fluid motions that indicated the warmer room was affecting them. "Ambassador Wright," the captain greeted him. "I trust your first night aboard was adequate?" "It was, thank you, and I appreciate the temperature adjustment in this room. We cannot maintain these conditions throughout the ship, but we can create specific areas for your comfort during your stay." As they discussed diplomatic matters, Alan noticed the aliens becoming increasingly animated. Their speech quickened, and their forearms gestured more emphatically. After about 30 minutes, one of the officers leaned toward the captain and whispered something. "I apologize, Ambassador, but we must continue this discussion in standard temperature conditions," Captain Nix explained. "The elevated heat is causing our metabolisms to function at unsustainable rates. We are, as you might say, overheating." Alan nodded understandingly. "Of course. I don't wish to cause discomfort." As they relocated to a cooler room, Alan bundled up in his jacket again. The meeting continued with the aliens noticeably calmer in the cooler environment. They discussed Earth's application to the Galactic Council, the protocols for the upcoming presentation, and the various species Alan would meet. Throughout the conversation, Alan couldn't help but notice how the differences in their biology shaped everything about their interaction. Something as simple as body temperature, something he had always taken for granted, had become a diplomatic challenge. "Tomorrow," Captain Nix said as the meeting concluded, "we will enter the central system where the council convenes. Your formal presentation will begin the following cycle." Alan nodded. "I'll be ready." What neither Alan nor the Zalthraxians knew was that their journey to the council would soon be interrupted by an unexpected crisis, one where the very biological differences that now complicated their relations would prove unexpectedly valuable. Alan woke suddenly as a deep rumble shook his quarters. The lights flickered, dimmed, and switched to a pulsing red. An announcement in the Zalthraxian language echoed through the ship, followed by a translation. "Alert. Environmental system. Malfunction. All crew report to designated stations." Pulling on his clothes quickly, Alan moved to the door. It didn't open automatically as usual. He found the manual release panel Frel had shown him during the tour, and pushed it. The door slid open with a hiss. The corridor outside was chaos. Zalthraxian crew members moved with unusual sluggishness, their normally fluid motions now stiff and awkward. The ship rumbled again, and Alan braced himself against the wall. "Ambassador Wright," Frel called, approaching from down the corridor. Her movements seemed slower than normal. "Please return to your quarters. We are experiencing technical difficulties." "What's happening?" Alan asked, noticing how the air felt different, warmer. "We passed through an unexpected nebula," Frel explained, her speech noticeably slower than usual. "The particle density damaged our primary cooling systems. The ship's temperature is rising." Now Alan understood why the Zalthraxians were moving so strangely. As cold-blooded creatures, the temperature change was affecting their metabolism. "How can I help?" he asked. Frel seemed surprised by the offer. "This is not a diplomatic matter, Ambassador. Our engineers are attempting repairs." Another crew member approached, moving with visible effort. "Science Officer Frel, the captain, requests all senior staff in the command center immediately." Frel turned back to Alan. "Please remain in your quarters. The environmental systems should stabilize soon." Alan returned to his room reluctantly. For the first time since boarding, he felt comfortable without his jacket. The rising temperature that was causing the aliens' distress was actually pleasant for him. He tried to contact Earth but found communications were offline. Likely another system affected by whatever had damaged the cooling mechanisms. Hours passed with periodic announcements, each sounding more urgent than the last. Alan paced his quarters, feeling useless. Finally, unable to wait any longer, he decided to find out what was happening. Using the manual release again, he stepped into a corridor that was noticeably warmer than before. The few crew members he passed barely acknowledged him, their movements now alarmingly slow. Following the route he remembered from the tour, Alan made his way toward the command center. When he arrived, the doors were open, and he saw a scene of quiet crisis. Captain, Nick sat in the command chair, surrounded by senior officers moving with painful slowness. The captain's normally vibrant blue skin had paled to an almost gray tone. The ship's temperature display showed numbers rising steadily. "Ambassador Wright." Captain Nix noted his presence with obvious effort. "You should not be here." "I want to help," Alan said, stepping forward. "What's the situation?" Engineer Drex, whom Alan had met briefly during the tour, turned from a control panel. His movements were so slow that raising a hand took several seconds. "The primary and secondary cooling systems are inoperable. Temperature is rising ship-wide. How long until repairs can be completed? Alan asked. At current crew efficiency. Drex paused, seemingly struggling to complete the thought. Repairs may take days, but critical biological thresholds will be reached in approximately 12 hours. Alan suddenly understood the gravity of the situation. The rising temperature wasn't just uncomfortable for the Zalthraxians, it was potentially fatal. Their bodies couldn't function properly in this heat, and as the temperature rose, they would become increasingly incapacitated until... What's the core problem? Alan asked. What needs to be fixed? Captain Nix and Engineer Drex exchanged glances. Finally, the captain spoke. The particle storm damaged regulator nodes in 3 separate cooling junction rooms. They must be manually replaced and recalibrated, but those areas are now too warm for safe Zalthraxian biological function. How warm? Alan pressed. Approximately 85 degrees by your Fahrenheit scale, Drex replied. Near lethal for sustained exposure to our species. Alan almost laughed with relief. That's nothing for a human. It's a pleasant spring day on Earth. I could go. The aliens stared at him. Captain Nix spoke first. You offer to enter these areas? Of course, Alan said. Just tell me what needs to be done. A flicker of hope appeared in the captain's eyes. Engineer Drex, is it possible to instruct the ambassador in the necessary procedures? Drex considered this. The replacement process is not complex. Calibration requires careful adjustment of thermal regulators according to specific patterns. I could prepare instructions. His voice trailed off as his metabolism continued to slow with the rising heat. Do it, Captain Nix ordered. Quickly, while you still can. For the next 30 minutes, Drex worked slowly but methodically with Alan, explaining the repair process and showing him diagrams of the cooling system on a tablet. The replacement parts, sleek silver cylinders with blue cores, were gathered from storage. These are the regulator nodes, Drex explained. Each junction room has 4 that must be replaced. Then the calibration sequence must be entered precisely. Alan nodded, memorizing the procedures. I understand. By the time they finished preparations, the command center temperature had risen another 2 degrees. Several crew members had stopped, moving entirely, entering what Frel quietly explained was a thermal conservation state, essentially hibernation. Ambassador, Captain Nix said, her voice barely audible now. We have no right to ask this of you. This is not your ship, not your responsibility. Alan shook his head. I'm a representative of Earth. Helping others in crisis is very human. Besides, I'm the only one here who can function in these temperatures. With the replacement nodes in a bag and the tablet with instructions securely in hand, Alan left for the first junction room. The ship felt increasingly warm to him, perhaps 80 degrees now, but it was nothing uncomfortable. For the Zalthraxians, however, it was approaching a lethal environment. The first junction room was located 3 decks below. As Alan made his way through the ship, he passed more and more crew members in hibernation state. Their bodies shut down to preserve vital functions. Those still conscious moved like they were underwater, desperately slow. The junction room door was marked with warning symbols in Zalthraxian script. Inside, the heat hit Alan like a wall, perhaps 95 degrees. For him, it was like a warm summer day. For a Zalthraxian, it would be fatal within minutes. The cooling system components glowed softly in the dim emergency lighting. Alan located the regulator nodes, 4 glowing cylinders, each showing damage. Following Drex's instructions, he carefully removed the first damaged node, replaced it with a new one, and began the calibration sequence. As he worked, sweat beaded on his forehead, not from heat stress, but from concentration and the pressure of knowing thousands of lives depended on his success. One by one, he replaced all 4 nodes and completed the calibration. First junction complete, he reported through the communication device Drex had given him. There was no response, just static. Worried but determined, Alan headed for the second junction room. Throughout the ship, the Zalthraxians waited in a state between consciousness and hibernation, their fate now in the hands of the heat-generating alien they had once feared would set their ship on fire. The second junction room was 3 decks away and on the opposite side of the ship. Alan moved quickly through the warm corridors, passing more Zalthraxians in hibernation state. Those still conscious watched him with new eyes, no longer seeing a dangerous heat source but perhaps their only hope. This junction room was even hotter than the first, close to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Alan removed his jacket as he worked, comfortable in just his shirt. The damaged nodes here were worse, with 2 completely dark and non-functional. He replaced all 4 and carefully performed the calibration sequence as Drex had shown him. Second junction complete, he reported into the communicator. This time, a faint response came through. Acknowledged, came Drex's slow, labored voice. Ship temperature and still rising, but rate has decreased. Third junction, most critical. The third junction room was located near the ship's power core. According to the ship schematic on his tablet, it controlled cooling for the most vital systems, including life support. By the time Alan reached this area, he had been working for nearly 6 hours straight. The door to the third junction room had emergency warnings flashing. When it slid open, a wave of heat hit Alan that even he found uncomfortable, at least 110 degrees. Inside, warning lights flashed across all panels. This cooling system had failed completely, and without it, the ship's power core would eventually overheat and shut down. Alan wiped sweat from his brow and got to work. The damage here was extensive. Not only were the regulator nodes destroyed, but surrounding circuitry had melted. He would need to repair connections before replacing the nodes. Drex, he called into the communicator. The damage is worse than expected. I need instructions for repairing the connection pathways. Long moments passed before a response came. Use blue repair tool in emergency kit. Follow connection paths. The engineer's voice was alarmingly weak and faded completely before finishing. Alan found the emergency kit mounted on the wall and located a device that matched the description. It projected a blue light that revealed otherwise invisible circuitry, pathways. Working methodically despite the heat, Alan traced each damaged pathway and used the tool to repair connections. His shirt became soaked with sweat, but he focused entirely on the task. After what seemed like hours, he finally completed the circuit repairs and began replacing the regulator nodes. The final calibration sequence was the most complex of all. Alan checked and rechecked each step, knowing there was no margin for error. As he entered the final command, the system hummed to life. Blue lights replaced red warning signals, and a soft hiss indicated cooling systems reactivating. Third junction, complete, Alan reported, though he wasn't sure anyone could hear him anymore. Exhausted but determined, he made his way back toward the command center. Throughout the ship, the temperature had stopped rising but remained dangerously high for the Zalthraxians. Many were completely motionless in hibernation, while others moved with agonizing slowness. Alan checked his tablet and saw that without the final calibrations from the command center, the cooling system couldn't fully engage. When he reached the command center, he found a grim scene. Only Captain Nix and 2 other officers remained conscious, and barely so. The rest lay in hibernation state at their stations. "Captain," Alan called, approaching the command chair. Captain Nix's eyes opened slightly. Her movements were so slow they were barely perceptible. "Ambassador, you succeeded? All 3 junctions are repaired, but I need to activate the master controls here to complete the process." The captain tried to respond but couldn't form words. Her metabolism had slowed too much. Alan looked around desperately and spotted Engineer Drex slumped at a control panel. "Drex, which controls activate the cooling system?" The engineer's eyes flickered open, but he couldn't speak. With tremendous effort, he raised one arm a fraction of an inch toward a panel with blue symbols. Alan rushed to the panel. The controls were labeled in Zalthraxian, but he recognized patterns from his tablet instructions. Following what he remembered from Drex's training, he entered what he hoped was the correct sequence. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then a deep hum vibrated through the ship. Vents in the walls activated, and Alan felt cooler air. begin to circulate. The temperature display showed numbers finally beginning to drop. "It's working," he said with relief. "The temperature is falling." He checked on Captain Nix and the others, but none could respond. According to Frel's earlier explanation, they would remain in hibernation until their body temperature returned to safe levels. There was nothing more he could do but wait. Hours passed as Alan monitored the systems. The ship's temperature fell steadily but slowly. After nearly 14 hours since he'd completed the repairs, the environmental readouts finally showed temperatures approaching normal Zalthraxian ranges. The command center, subtle changes began. Captain Nix's skin tone shifted from gray back toward blue. Her breathing became more noticeable. Around the room, other crew members showed similar signs of recovery. Drex was the first to regain consciousness enough to speak. "Ambassador," he said, his voice weak but clearer than before. "You saved the ship." Gradually, others throughout the vessel began to awaken from hibernation. Medical teams, themselves just recovering, checked on crew members who had been exposed to the highest temperatures. System by system, the ship returned to normal operations. Captain Nix regained full consciousness after 18 hours. When she could finally stand again, she approached Alan, who had remained in the command center catching brief moments of sleep in a chair. "Ambassador Wright," the captain said formally, though her movements were still somewhat sluggish. "There are no words in our language or yours to express what you have done for us." Alan shook his head. "Anyone would have helped if they could." "No," Captain Nix said firmly. "What you did was extraordinary. You worked for over 20 Earth hours without rest in conditions that would have killed any of us within minutes. Our biological differences, which we first saw as a challenge, proved to be our salvation." Around the command center, the recovered crew members watched Alan with new expressions. Not fear or scientific curiosity, but deep respect. "The Zalthraxian people do not forget such actions," the captain continued. "When we reach the Galactic Council, our recommendation regarding Earth's application will reflect what we have learned about humans today." As systems continued to recover, Alan finally returned to his quarters for proper rest. The room's temperature had returned to the cold setting the Zalthraxians preferred, but he didn't mind bundling up now. What had started as a simple diplomatic mission had become something much more meaningful, a demonstration of humanity's unique abilities and willingness to help others in crisis. What he didn't yet know was how dramatically this incident would change the Council's perception of humans and their place in the galactic community. 2 days after the cooling system crisis, the Zalthraxian mothership entered the Galactic Council space. Through the viewport in his quarters, Alan watched as they approached a massive structure that seemed to float like a snowflake in space. The Council headquarters was an enormous wheel with crystalline spokes extending from a central hub, all glowing with soft blue light. Communications had been restored, allowing Alan to report to Earth about the incident and the upcoming Council presentation. His superiors were surprised by the events but pleased about the positive impression he had made. "We're receiving unusual messages from the Zalthraxian High Command," his supervisor told him. "They've changed their recommendation about Earth's membership status." "Changed how?" Alan asked. "They won't say exactly, but the tone is remarkably positive. Whatever you did made quite an impression." As the ship docked at the Council station, Alan noticed a change in how the crew interacted with him. The fearful distance they had maintained before the crisis was gone. Now they approached closer, some even attempting the human custom of handshakes despite the temperature difference they could feel through brief contact. Science Officer Frel, who had recovered fully, came to escort him to his preparation room. "The Council session begins in 3 hours, she explained. "Captain Nix wishes to speak with you before the formal proceedings." The meeting room was set at a compromised temperature, cool enough for the Zalthraxians to function normally but warm enough that Alan didn't need his jacket. Captain Nix and several senior officers waited for him. "Ambassador Wright," the captain greeted him. "Before we enter the Council chamber, there is something you should know. We have submitted a detailed report of the cooling system crisis and your actions to save our ship." Alan nodded. "I assumed you would. It's relevant to our application." More than relevant, Nix continued. It has fundamentally changed our assessment of humanity. When you first boarded our ship, we saw your biology as strange and potentially dangerous. Even after learning about human thermal regulation, we viewed it as an unusual trait that might complicate relations. Engineer Drex stepped forward. What you showed us goes beyond biology. You demonstrated endurance, problem-solving under pressure, and willingness to risk your own safety for others. These qualities are as valuable as any technological advancement. Captain. Nix nodded agreement. The Zalthraxian High Command has changed our recommendation to the Council. Instead of suggesting Earth receive provisional observer status, we are advocating for immediate full membership. Alan was stunned. Earth had hoped for observer status at best, with full membership perhaps years away. That's unexpected. Thank you. There is something else, Frel added. News of your actions has spread to other Council species. The biological traits humans take for granted, your internal heat generation, endurance, and adaptability, are considered remarkable by many galactic standards. Alan followed them to the Council chamber, still processing this information. The Grand Hall was enormous, with concentric rings of seating surrounding a central speaking platform. Representatives from dozens of species filled the seats, their varied forms. A testament to the diversity of life in the galaxy, some appeared vaguely humanoid, while others were utterly alien, crystalline structures, floating gas clouds contained in mechanical suits, and beings that seemed made of pure light. The temperature in the chamber was cool, and Alan was glad, for the formal diplomatic uniform he wore. Captain Nix led him to the central platform where the session would begin. A tall, silver-skinned being approached. Welcome to the Galactic Council, Ambassador Wright. I am High Counselor Vex. The Zalthraxian delegation has shared quite an extraordinary report about you. Thank you, High Counselor. I simply did what was necessary in an emergency. What you consider necessary, others find remarkable. The counselor gestured around the chamber. Many species here evolved in specialized environments and require extensive technology to function outside their native habitats. Species that can adapt to varied conditions without technological assistance are rare and valuable to our community. The formal session began with Captain Nix presenting Earth's application for membership. As planned, Alan delivered his prepared speech about Earth's history, achievements, and desire to join the galactic community. What he hadn't expected was the response. The Council has reviewed Earth's application with great interest, High Counselor Vex announced, particularly in light of recent events aboard the Zalthraxian vessel Celestial Voyager. We would like to hear more about these human biological traits that proved so crucial in that crisis. Alan found himself describing basic human biology, warm-bloodedness, sweating, endurance, and healing, to an audience that found these ordinary features fascinating. The concept of humans maintaining their own body heat regardless of environment seemed especially impressive to species that required careful environmental control. In most advanced civilizations, one counselor explained, species evolve toward specialized environmental adaptation and technological dependency. Humans appear to have maintained remarkable biological versatility while still developing technology. This combination is unusual. The questions continued for hours. Alan explained human adaptability, how people lived in environments from Arctic tundra to equatorial jungles, how humans could work for days with minimal rest when necessary, how injuries healed without medical intervention, and how the human immune system fought disease. Finally, the council withdrew to deliberate. Alan waited with the Zalthraxian delegation, surprised by how thoroughly his mission had changed from its original purpose. They are impressed, Captain Nix told him quietly, not just by what you did, but by what it reveals about humanity's potential contributions to the Council. When the Council returned, High Counselor Vex made the announcement. By unanimous decision, Earth is granted full membership in the Galactic Council, effective immediately. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Such immediate acceptance was apparently unprecedented. Furthermore, the counselor continued, We request that Earth send additional representatives to advise on adaptation protocols. Your species' natural resilience may help us develop new approaches for emergency situations and environmental adaptation." After the session concluded, Alan stood with Captain Nix near a viewport overlooking the vast starfield. "When I first boarded your ship and triggered fire alerts with my body temperature, I never imagined it would lead to this," he said. The captain's skin rippled with patterns Alan now recognized as amusement. "They reported a fire on deck," she said, "but it was only the human boarding, and that human showed us that what appears dangerous from one perspective may be precisely what saves you from another." As Alan prepared to return to Earth with news of their unexpected diplomatic success, he couldn't help but smile at the irony. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been secured not by superior technology or military power, but by the simple biological traits every human took for granted: the ability to generate their own heat, adapt to changing conditions, and lend a helping hand when needed. Sometimes the most ordinary traits from one perspective were the most extraordinary from another.